What if ancient civilizations knew secrets about genetic manipulation that we're only discovering today? Buried deep within the dusty clay tablets of Babylon, cryptic warnings echo across millennia, forbidding something that sounds eerily familiar to our modern ears: the tampering of life itself. These texts, written in the cradle of human civilization, speak of catastrophic consequences tied to altering the essence of living beings. But how could a society that existed over 4,000 years ago even conceive of such ideas? And why did they fear this power so deeply? The answers lie in fragments of forgotten knowledge, waiting to be pieced together like an ancient puzzle we've only just begun to solve. Picture this: long before labs and microscopes, Babylonian priests and scholars meticulously recorded their understanding of the natural world on clay tablets. Among their astronomical calculations and medical remedies, they also left behind strict prohibitions against something called the reshaping of flesh and spirit. These weren't vague superstitions, they were precise, almost clinical in their warnings. The texts describe horrors, twisted creatures, plagues, and divine wrath, all tied to the reckless interference with life's blueprint. It's as if they witnessed something terrifying enough to embed these fears into their culture's very foundation. And here's the chilling part: their descriptions bear an uncanny resemblance to the ethical dilemmas we face today with genetic engineering. This isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a mirror held up to our own time. In an era where scientists can edit DNA with tools like CRISPR, where the line between healing and playing God grows ever thinner, the Babylonians' warnings take on new urgency. Were they privy to lost technologies or forbidden knowledge? Or did they intuit, through myth and observation, the dangers we're now grappling with in labs? As we unravel their cryptic messages, we're forced to ask ourselves, are we repeating the mistakes they tried so desperately to prevent? Join me as we journey into the heart of these ancient texts, decode their unsettling prophecies, and explore what they might mean for humanity's future. The past, it seems, has been trying to speak to us all along. Will we listen? The Babylonians weren't just another ancient civilization. They were pioneers of human knowledge, architects of a world so sophisticated it still echoes in our science and philosophy today. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, their empire thrived on innovation, from the earliest legal codes to celestial maps so precise they could predict eclipses centuries in advance. But what truly set them apart was their understanding of the universe as an intricate, interconnected web. To them, the stars weren't just lights in the sky, they were divine omens, the handwriting of the gods on the fabric of reality. Medicine wasn't merely herbs and potions, it was a sacred art balancing the physical and spiritual realms, and creation, that was the ultimate divine act, something only the gods had the right to alter. This cosmological perspective seeped into every aspect of Babylonian life, especially their laws. The famous Code of Hammurabi, with its meticulous rules for everything from property disputes to medical malpractice, wasn't just about order, it was about maintaining cosmic harmony. Tampering with life's natural order wasn't just illegal, it was blasphemy. Their texts describe creation as a delicate balance, a divine blueprint that could unravel if humans overstepped their bounds. Imagine a society where astronomers doubled as priests, where healing rituals involved incantations to the gods of fate, and where the very idea of reshaping life was seen as inviting chaos into the world. That was Babylon. Their warnings about genetic manipulation, or what they called the mingling of essences, didn't emerge from ignorance. They came from a profound, almost eerie understanding of life's fragility. Babylonian physicians knew enough about heredity to breed animals selectively, yet their texts strictly forbade experiments that blurred the lines between species. Their astronomers mapped the heavens with mathematical precision, yet they feared the consequences of disrupting nature's rhythms. It's as if their scientific brilliance gave them a glimpse of something darker, a shadowy threshold humanity wasn't meant to cross. And so they codified that fear into law, etching it into clay tablets as a warning to future generations. What's striking is how their cosmology mirrors modern ethical debates. Today, we have tools to edit genes, to splice DNA between species, to engineer life in ways that would have been unthinkable even a century ago. Yet, like the Babylonians, we're grappling with the same fundamental question. Just because we can, does it mean we should? Their answer, carved into stone 4,000 years ago, was a resounding no. Whether they'd witnessed ancient biotech disasters or simply intuited the dangers, their message is unnervingly prescient. In a world where science moves faster than wisdom, their clay tablets might just hold the cautionary tale we need to hear. To understand why the Babylonians viewed genetic manipulation with such dread, we must first unravel the fabric of their universe, the Enuma Elish. This ancient creation epic, inscribed on 7 clay tablets, isn't just a story of gods and chaos. It's a blueprint for the sacred order of life itself. The tale begins with 2 primordial forces, Apsu and Tiamat, representing fresh water and salt water, whose union births the younger gods. But this divine family quickly descends into rebellion, leading to a cosmic battle where the god Marduk slays Tiamat, splitting her body to form the heavens and earth. Here's the crucial detail. Marduk doesn't just create the world, he meticulously organizes it, assigning fixed roles to every celestial body, every living thing. The universe in this myth isn't born from randomness but from deliberate, irreversible design. What makes the Enuma Elish so revealing is its obsession with boundaries. The gods don't just establish land and sky, they set unbreakable laws governing them. Stars follow predetermined paths, seasons cycle in exact rhythms, and creatures are shaped for specific purposes. When Marduk creates humanity from the blood of a rebellious god, it's with one clear directive: to serve the divine order, not disrupt it. This isn't mythology as mere storytelling, it's a theological manifesto. The Babylonians believed the universe was a fragile equilibrium maintained by strict rules. To alter the essence of a living being wasn't just dangerous, it was an act of cosmic treason, a rebellion against the very architecture of existence. The parallels to modern genetics are startling. Just as the Enuma Elish describes life as a carefully arranged code, we now know DNA functions as a biological blueprint. The Babylonians feared that tampering with this divine script would invite chaos, much like today's ethicists warn of unintended consequences from gene editing. Their myth even hints at something akin to genetic corruption. When the younger gods disturb the primordial order, their noise becomes a metaphor for disorder, a disruption so severe it threatens all creation. It's as if the Enuma Elish encodes an ancient intuition. Life's design isn't just powerful, it's perilous to interfere with. But the myth's deepest warning lies in its depiction of creation as a one-way process. Once Marduk establishes the world's structure, it's meant to remain unchanged. There's no undo button, no return to chaos without catastrophic consequences. This mirrors our own scientific understanding of genetic changes. Once introduced into a population, they're nearly impossible to reverse. The Babylonians, lacking labs or microscopes, grasped through metaphor what we now confirm with data. Life's building blocks aren't toys. They're the threads holding reality together. Perhaps most haunting is how the Enuma Elish frames humanity's role. We're not the masters of creation but its custodians, tasked with preserving the balance set by higher powers. In an age where CRISPR can rewrite life's code over a weekend, this ancient perspective feels less like superstition and more like a sobering caution. The Babylonians didn't just fear gods smiting them for overreach, they feared unraveling the very fabric of their world. As we stand on the threshold of rewriting our own genetic destiny, their 4,000-year-old warning whispers across the ages: some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. At the heart of Babylonian beliefs lay a concept so powerful it shaped every law, ritual, and daily practice: the idea of Temmu. Translated as divine ordinance or fixed decree, Temmu wasn't just a set of rules, it was the sacred rhythm of the cosmos itself, the unbreakable laws set by the gods to maintain balance in all things. Imagine a world where every river's flow, every harvest's yield, even the fate of a newborn child was seen as part of this grand, preordained design. To violate Temmu wasn't merely disobedience, it was an act of cosmic rebellion, a ripple that could unravel the very fabric of reality. The Babylonians believed Temmu governed everything from celestial movements to the boundaries between species. Their legal texts and omens are filled with warnings against crossing these divine lines, especially when it came to the essence of living beings. One striking example comes from the Sherpu incantation series, where altering an animal's natural form is listed among the gravest offenses, alongside crimes like temple robbery or murder. Why such severity? Because in their eyes, life wasn't just biological. It was a sacred artifact meticulously crafted by the gods. To reshape a creature's inherent nature was to defy the hands that designed it. What's fascinating is how Temmu's principles mirror modern bioethical dilemmas. Today's debates over gene editing, whether for curing diseases or enhancing traits, echo the same core question the Babylonians wrestled with: where do we draw the line between healing and hubris? Their answer was clear. Temmu marked that line in stone. Take their laws on hybrid animals. Babylonian breeders excelled at selective practices, yet texts strictly forbade attempts to merge distinct species, calling such acts kilulu, an abomination that confused the essences ordained by the gods. Sound familiar? It's eerily close to contemporary concerns over transgenic organisms, where mixing DNA across species sparks fierce ethical Chinese letter. But Temmu wasn't just about fear, it reflected a profound insight into interdependence. The Babylonians saw all life as threads in a vast tapestry. Tug one thread out of place, and the whole image distorts. Medical tablets from the period describe diseases as imbalances in the body's natural order, often linking illnesses to spiritual disharmony. This holistic view extended to their ecological practices, where overhunting or altering landscapes was taboo, not for practical reasons, but because it violated Temmu's delicate equilibrium. In an age where CRISPR can rewrite life's code in a lab, their warnings feel less like ancient superstition and more like a startling premonition. The most haunting parallel lies in their concept of unintended consequences. Babylonian omen texts like the Enuma Elish catalogued celestial signs predicting disasters, many of which involved the gods withdrawing their favor after humans disrupted natural law. One tablet describes plagues striking cities where the flesh of beasts was mingled unnaturally. Whether these were metaphors or records of actual experiments gone wrong remains debated, but the underlying message is clear. Tampering with life's blueprint risked unleashing forces beyond human control. 4,000 years later, as we navigate the unintended effects of gene drives or CRISPR-edited crops spreading in the wild, Temmu's shadow looms large. Yet amid these warnings, the Babylonians offered something we often lack today: a framework for humility. Their laws didn't just say, "don't." They embedded respect for life's intrinsic design into every aspect of society. Temmu wasn't a cage but a compass, reminding humanity of its role as stewards, not architects of creation. As we stand at the brink of rewriting our own genetic destiny, perhaps their ancient wisdom holds a key we've overlooked: that progress without reverence is a dangerous path. The clay tablets of Babylon, weathered by time but not by relevance, challenge us to ask not just can we, but should we, and who, in the end, gets to decide. Among the most enigmatic artifacts in Babylonian mythology are the legendary tablets of destiny, not mere stone slabs, but cosmic contracts said to hold the power to decree life and death itself. According to the Enuma Elish, these tablets were wrested from the primordial goddess Tiamat by Marduk after her defeat, becoming the ultimate source of divine authority. Whoever possessed them didn't just rule the gods, they dictated the fate of all existence. Every birth, every harvest, every sunset, their rhythms were inscribed on these sacred records. But the tablets weren't just about control, they symbolized an unbreakable covenant between the divine and the natural order. To alter what was written on them wasn't just forbidden, it was cosmically impossible. This mythology carries a chilling implication for genetic manipulation. The Babylonians saw life's design as divinely authored, its code as immutable as the stars' paths. Mortals could no more rewrite it than they could command the sun to stand still. Texts like the Era epic reinforce this boundary. When the warrior god Era temporarily steals the tablets, chaos erupts, plagues spread, animals birth monstrosities, and the boundaries between species blur. The message is clear: tampering with life's blueprint isn't just dangerous, it's a theft of divine prerogative. Strikingly, these myths don't portray the gods as cruel for hoarding this power, they frame it as a mercy. Without the tablets' fixed decrees, reality itself would unravel. The parallels to modern science are impossible to ignore. Today, we've identified our own tablets of destiny in the double helix of DNA, and with CRISPR, we hold tools that feel eerily close to those mythical powers. But where the Babylonians saw hubris in such acts, we often see progress. Yet their warnings resonate in contemporary debates. When bioethicists argue that editing human embryos could irrevocably alter the human gene pool, or when ecologists warn that gene drives might disrupt entire ecosystems, they echo the Era epic's nightmares. The Babylonians would have recognized these fears instantly, not as superstition, but as hard-learned reverence for life's interconnected fragility. What makes their perspective so compelling is its nuance. The tablets weren't just about restriction, they embodied responsibility. Babylonian kings, though seen as divinely appointed, couldn't claim the tablets' authority, they merely enforced their decrees. Even the gods were bound by them, their power derived from stewardship, not ownership. This contrasts sharply with today's often unchecked race to edit genes, where corporations patent life forms and labs compete to push boundaries first, ask questions later. The tablets remind us that true authority over life demands humility, a recognition that some lines exist not to limit potential, but to preserve the very framework that makes life possible. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the tablets' material. They weren't etched in gold or some indestructible metal, but in clay, fragile, mutable, yet enduring when handled with care. A fitting metaphor for DNA itself, resilient yet delicate, capable of bearing humanity's hopes or its follies. The Babylonians would likely marvel at our scientific prowess, but they'd ask one haunting question: have we earned the right to hold what they called the breath of the gods? As we stand where myth and science converge, their answer lingers like an unbroken seal. Some powers belong not in mortal hands, but in the keeping of time itself. The story of Adapa, humanity's first sage according to Babylonian legend, reads like an ancient blueprint for our modern ethical dilemmas. Gifted with unparalleled wisdom by the god E, Adapa could speak the language of animals, command the winds, even heal the sick, but his greatest test came when he was summoned before Anu, king of the gods. Offered the bread and water of eternal life, Adapa refused, obeying E's warning that these gifts were a trap. What he didn't realize, the warning itself was the deception. E, fearing what might happen if a mortal possessed both wisdom and immortality, had tricked Adapa into choosing perpetual mortality instead. The message was clear: some knowledge once attained must never be coupled with godlike power. This myth isn't just about lost immortality, it's a mirror held up to genetic engineering's promises and perils. Like Adapa, we've been granted extraordinary knowledge, the ability to rewrite life's code, to potentially extend human lifespan, even to erase genetic diseases. But the Babylonian tale forces us to confront a haunting question. Are we too being tricked by our own version of E, not by a deceptive god, but by the seductive illusion of control? Adapa's story suggests that wisdom alone isn't enough, that without the temperance of humility, even the brightest minds can be led astray. The parallels run deeper. In one Babylonian fragment, Adapa is described breaking the wings of the south wind in a fit of rage, an act that disrupts nature's balance until the gods intervene. It's a powerful metaphor for unintended consequences, something every geneticist grapples with today. CRISPR might snip away a disease-causing gene, but what unseen ripples might that edit create in the vast pool of our genome? The Babylonians encoded their answer in myth. Tampering with life's forces, however well-intentioned, risks fracturing systems we don't fully understand. What makes the Adapa myth particularly chilling is its depiction of divine motives. The gods didn't punish Adapa for being too ambitious, they feared what he might become. In their eyes, mortality was a safeguard, a boundary ensuring humans never rivaled their creators. Today, that boundary is blurring, with gene therapies pushing lifespans longer and biohackers experimenting with self-edited DNA. We're inching toward Adapa's crossroads. The ancient text's warning vibrates through time. Immortality, or even its pursuit, might not be a gift but a test we're perilously equipped to fail. Yet the myth offers more than just caution. Embedded in Adapa's failure is a profound insight about human nature. The Babylonians didn't view curiosity as a flaw. Adapa's wisdom was celebrated, but they recognized that knowledge demands proportional responsibility. Their temples doubled as libraries, their priests as scientists, because understanding the world was sacred work. The lesson, genetic manipulation isn't inherently monstrous, it's the context that matters. Without the guardrails of ethics, without respect for life's inherent balance, we risk repeating Adapa's mistake, reaching for heaven without realizing we might lose our earthly wisdom in the process. As we decode ancient genes and rewrite modern ones, the Adapa myth whispers a question we've yet to answer. Will we use our godlike tools to serve life's natural order, or will we, like so many mythic heroes, let ambition eclipse wisdom? The Babylonians left their reply etched in clay, a story not of villains and victims, but of choices and consequences. 4,000 years later, their warning floats in petri dishes and lab journals, waiting to see if we've learned what Adapa could not. The Babylonians mastered the art of healing with a precision that still astonishes historians, yet their medical texts draw a firm, unyielding line at the threshold of creation. Clay tablets from Nineveh and Babylon detail hundreds of remedies: willow bark for inflammation, dates blended with honey for coughs, even rudimentary surgical procedures for eye ailments. But scroll further and you'll find something startlingly absent: any attempt to design life. Their healing was restorative, never inventive. A broken bone could be set, a fever cooled, but the essence of the patient remained sacrosanct. This wasn't a limitation of knowledge, it was a philosophical firewall. Consider the Diagnostic Handbook, a Mesopotamian medical text so advanced it linked symptoms to specific organs millennia before modern anatomy. It prescribed treatments for everything from liver ailments to mental distress, often blending herbs with incantations to drive out the hand of the demon. Yet when faced with congenital conditions, birth defects, or inherited illnesses, the text doesn't suggest altering the unborn. Instead, it speaks of accepting the seal of the gods. Why? Because Babylonian medicine viewed life as a finished masterpiece. A physician could restore faded colors or repair cracks, but repainting the canvas, that was the domain of deities alone. The contrast with modern genetics couldn't be starker. Today, we edit embryos to eliminate hereditary diseases, splice genes across species to create drought-resistant crops, and debate the ethics of designer babies. The Babylonians would have shuddered at such hubris. Their medical tablets reveal a world view where healing and harm hinged on intent. An exorcist chanting over a sick child was restoring divine order, a sorcerer crafting hybrid creatures, a practice their laws called a saku, was inviting cosmic chaos. The difference wasn't just technical, it was moral. To heal was to honor Temmu, the natural law. To redesign life was to fracture it. This principle echoed through their most sacred healing rites. Take the Asu, priest-physicians who treated epilepsy by reciting prayers to the god Marduk while administering Nadatu, a clay figurine shaped like the afflicted organ and ritually buried. The symbolism was profound. Illness was a disruption to be buried, not a blueprint to be rewritten. Even their famed demonology reinforced this boundary. Spirits like Lamashtu, blamed for miscarriages, were driven away with amulets, never fixed at the genetic level. The Babylonians accepted certain suffering as part of life's tapestry, focusing instead on alleviating pain within the boundaries set by the divine. Perhaps the most telling example lies in their approach to heredity. Babylonian breeders excelled at selecting traits in animals, strong oxen, fertile sheep, yet their texts warn against mingling the essences of different species. A tablet from Sippar admonishes, "Let not the lion's seed enter the flock, nor the eagle's blood mix with the dove." The parallel to modern transgenic experiments is uncanny. They grasped the concept of inherited traits but saw species barriers as sacred firewalls. Crossing them didn't just risk biological consequences, it courted divine retribution. What emerges from these clay tablets isn't primitive fear but sophisticated bioethics. The Babylonians could have experimented. They had the empirical mindset, even rudimentary tools. Instead, they chose restraint, embedding in their culture a reverence for life's inviolable core. As we stand in labs holding CRISPR like modern tablets of destiny, their ancient warnings take on new weight. They understood something we're only now relearning, that healing and playing God are separated not by ability but by wisdom. Their herbs and incantations sought harmony with nature's laws. Our scalpels and gene guns, the Babylonians might ask, are we repairing the world or rewriting it beyond recognition? Among the most mysterious figures in Babylonian lore are the Apkallu 7 semi-divine sages who walked the line between gods and mortals. Ancient depictions show them as bizarre hybrids, part human, part fish or bird, their forms defying nature's boundaries. The texts describe them as bringers of civilization, teaching humanity everything from agriculture to temple building, yet their very existence seems to violate the Babylonians' own warnings against mingling essences. Why would a culture so fiercely protective of life's natural order venerate beings that embody its transgression? The answer may lie in what the Apkallu truly represented, not just mythical teachers but cautionary tales about the price of crossing cosmic lines. The Apkallu's hybrid forms are impossible to ignore. One surviving relief from Nineveh shows a fish-cloaked figure with human hands clutching a bucket, a symbol of purification, yet his appearance suggests anything but purity. Another tablet describes an Apkallu with the wings of an eagle and the tongue of a serpent, whispering secrets to kings. These weren't arbitrary designs, they were deliberate violations of Temmu, the sacred boundaries between species. Even their origin story hints at unnatural creation. The Bit Messeri texts claim the Apkallu were sent from the Apsu, the primordial underground waters, a realm associated not just with wisdom but with chaos. It's as if their very biology was a warning. Knowledge gained from blurring lines comes at a cost. Modern interpretations of the Apkallu range from the symbolic to the startling. Some scholars see them as metaphors for the dangers of overreach. Think of them as ancient Prometheuses, but others, like researcher Joshua Free, propose a radical theory. The Apkallu might reflect real genetic anomalies or even deliberate experiments. Babylonian texts mention lost arts from before the flood, techniques known only to these sages. Could arts refer to biotechnological knowledge? The description of Apkallu with shining skin and eyes that see in darkness fuels speculation about engineered traits. Even their fish-like attributes align eerily with modern research into aquatic DNA hybrids. Scientists today have inserted jellyfish genes into mice to create glowing offspring. The Apkallu's fate deepens the mystery. After their golden age, the texts say they were called back to the Apsu, replaced by mortal scholars. Some versions claim they were banished for angering the gods. Others say they chose to leave when humanity grew arrogant. Either way, their disappearance coincides with a hardening of Babylonian taboos against hybrid creatures. Later laws punished those who fashioned mixed beings with execution, a shift that suggests the Apkallu weren't just revered, they were feared. Their legacy became a paradox, celebrated as culture heroes, yet their existence justified stricter bans on tampering with life's design. What makes the Apkallu so hauntingly relevant is their duality. They embody both the temptation and the terror of playing creator, a tension we now face with CRISPR and synthetic biology. Their fish-human hybrids could be dismissed as myth, but consider this. In 2024, scientists created human-monkey chimeras to study organ growth. The Apkallu's winged forms sound fantastical, yet labs have spliced bird genes into poultry to alter limb development. The Babylonians may have lacked microscopes, but their myths articulate ethical dilemmas we're only now encountering. Were the Apkallu fictional? Almost certainly, but as genetic engineering blurs the line between species, their story feels less like ancient superstition and more like a prophetic allegory, one where wisdom and monstrosity share the same twisted root. Embedded within the Code of Hammurabi, one of humanity's oldest legal texts, lies a series of laws so severe they seem to tremble with ancient dread. Among the familiar statutes about property disputes and trade regulations, a few cryptic passages stand out: strict prohibitions against what the text calls corrupting the flesh of man or beast. These weren't vague warnings, they carried explicit penalties from exile to execution for anyone who twisted the form of living things. Scholars have long debated what these laws truly targeted. Were they addressing early bioengineering or something even darker? Take Law 253, which states, "If a man causes a sheep to bear the likeness of a lion, his hands shall be cut off." At first glance, this reads like poetic justice for fraud, perhaps punishing someone who dyed wool to imitate expensive pelts, but the phrasing is oddly specific. The Akkadian original uses the verb shanu, meaning to alter or to transform, suggesting something far more literal than cosmetic deception. Another law prescribes drowning for anyone who mingled the seed of a field to produce abominable fruit. Agricultural sabotage may be, but considering Babylonian knowledge of selective breeding, could this have been a primitive ban on genetically modified crops? The code's language grows even more chilling when addressing human experimentation. Law 218 warns, if a physician makes two bodies into one and the patient dies, the physician's life is forfeit. Mainstream interpretations assume this refers to botched surgeries or dangerous medical procedures, but the phrase, "two bodies into one," echoes eerily with modern chimera research, where scientists blend human and animal cells. Even more striking is a fragmented tablet from Sippar which references the crime of Adapa, a clear link to the myth of humanity's near immortality. Were Hammurabi's jurists encoding millennia-old taboos into law? Not every scholar agrees with these radical readings. Assyriologist Martha Roth argues the laws simply reflect practical concerns preventing fraud in livestock markets or punishing quack healers. Yet others, like Dr. Irving Finkel of the British Museum, point to the code's obsession with maintaining Kittim truth and Misharim order. In this light, the Unnatural Acts laws weren't just about commerce or medicine, they were about preserving cosmic balance. The code frequently invokes the gods Shamash and Marduk as its authors, framing legal breaches as offenses against divine law. Altering life's fundamental design, then, wasn't just illegal, it was an assault on reality itself. The debate takes a fascinating turn when examining punishments. Most code violations involved fines or reparations, but corruption of flesh warranted extreme measures: dismemberment, drowning, impalement. This disproportionate severity hints at more than pragmatic deterrence. It suggests existential terror. Compare this to modern debates over CRISPR bans or international gene editing moratoriums. Our legal systems, too, reserve the harshest penalties for biotech violations deemed against nature, from human cloning to germline editing. The parallel is uncanny. 4,000 years apart, separated by microscopes and clay tablets, humanity still grapples with the same primal fear that some knowledge once unleashed can't be contained. Perhaps the most revealing clue lies in what the code doesn't say. Unlike their meticulous cataloging of property crimes, the laws never define what constitutes corruption of flesh or seed. This ambiguity mirrors today's struggles to legally define genetic manipulation. Just as modern courts wrestle with whether gene-edited embryos are designer babies or medical miracles, Hammurabi's judges may have relied on something beyond written law, an instinctive, almost visceral recognition of crossing invisible lines. The code's silence on specifics speaks volumes. Some boundaries were so sacred they needed no explanation. As we pore over these ancient statutes, their warning vibrates through time. The Babylonians understood something we're relearning: that law alone can't guard every frontier of science. Some thresholds demand more than regulation, they require reverence. Whether punishing sheep-lion hybrids or CRISPR-edited infants, the core question remains unchanged. Who gets to redefine life? Hammurabi's answer, etched in basalt, was unequivocal. The gods drew the lines, mortals crossed them at their peril. Of all the Babylonian myths warning against tampering with life's design, none strikes a more visceral chord than the legend of the zoo bird, a monstrous creature part eagle, part lion, whose rebellion nearly unraveled creation itself. Ancient texts describe the zoo as more than just a beast. It was a cosmic thief, stealing the sacred tablet of destinies from the god Enlil in an audacious bid to rewrite the laws of existence. What makes this myth so gripping isn't just its drama. It's how precisely it mirrors the ethical quicks and we face today when science flirts with altering life's fundamental code. The tablet of destinies wasn't merely a physical object. It functioned like the universe's operating system, dictating everything from the season's turn to each mortal's lifespan. When the zoo snatched it, chaos erupted, rivers flowed backward, crops ripened out of season, and animals birthed unnatural hybrids. The parallels to genetic engineering are startling. Just as the zoo's theft disrupted nature's rhythms, CRISPR edits or synthetic biology could send unpredictable ripples through ecosystems. The myth even describes offspring born with 2 heads and no limbs, echoing modern fears over unintended mutations from gene editing. The Babylonians weren't just spinning tales, they were encoding a primal truth: life's balance is fragile, and those who disrupt it risk consequences far beyond their control. What's especially revealing is how the gods respond. They don't immediately destroy the zoo, they negotiate. The storm god Ninurta confronts the creature not with brute force but with riddles, outsmarting it to reclaim the tablet. This detail is crucial. The Babylonians acknowledged the allure of wielding creative power. The zoo wasn't evil, just ambitious, but they also believed such power demanded wisdom greater than any single being could possess. Today's genetic engineers, much like the zoo, operate with dazzling skill but limited foresight. When we splice genes or design synthetic organisms, are we, too, underestimating the complexity of the systems we're altering? The myth's climax holds an even darker warning. After the tablet is restored, the gods impose new safeguards. Multiple deities must now guard it, and its decrees are locked behind celestial firewalls. This wasn't just divine bureaucracy, it was institutionalized caution. The Babylonians recognized that once a boundary is crossed, you can't simply return to the old rules, you must build stronger barriers. In our era, where DIY biohacking kits are sold online and labs worldwide experiment with gene drives, the zoo's story asks if we've done enough to safeguard our own tablets, the foundational codes of biology that sustain us. Yet the most haunting question lingers in the myth's aftermath. Even after order is restored, the text notes subtle, permanent changes. Some rivers never returned to their original courses, certain stars shifted positions. The message is clear: some disruptions, once set in motion, can't be fully undone. Modern science confirms this in eerie ways. Gene drives designed to spread edited traits through entire species could irreversibly alter wild populations. Engineered microbes released into soil might propagate beyond human control. Like the zoo's theft, our tinkering with DNA could leave fingerprints that outlast civilizations. The zoo bird's legend ends not with triumph but with sober reflection. The gods recover their tablet, but they're forever wary. The creature itself isn't destroyed, it's banished to the edges of the world, a perpetual reminder of ambition's cost. As we push the boundaries of genetic science, the myth whispers across millennia. The power to reshape life isn't just a technical challenge, it's a test of humility. The Babylonians, gazing at the stars from their mud brick observatories, understood something we're still learning: that the greatest danger isn't failing to play God but succeeding. For the Babylonians, the night sky wasn't just a spectacle, it was a living blueprint, an intricate map where celestial patterns dictated the very essence of human existence. Their astrologers, painstakingly charting planetary movements across clay tablets, believed each person's traits, from physical appearance to temperament, were imprinted by the stars at birth. A child conceived under the sign of Ishtar might inherit beauty and charisma, while Mars' alignment could bestow a warrior's spirit. But this wasn't mere mysticism, it was a sophisticated system where biology and cosmology intertwined. To alter a person's inherent nature wasn't just a medical act, it was cosmic vandalism, a defiance of the celestial order that governed all life. The Enuma Elish, a sprawling collection of astrological omens, reveals how deeply this belief ran. One tablet warns that modifying a person's physical form during a Venus eclipse would call down the anger of the celestial herds, the gods who guided fate like shepherds tending flocks. Another describes birth defects as heavenly writing, signs meant to convey divine messages rather than errors to be corrected. This perspective framed genetic traits as sacred text authored by the cosmos itself. Modern genetics might replace planets with proteins, but the underlying question remains hauntingly similar. Do we have the right to edit what the universe or evolution has inscribed? Where Babylon saw divine intention in human variation, contemporary science often views it as code to debug. Take the modern debate over CRISPR editing for perceived flaws like deafness or dwarfism. Where some see medical progress, others, like the disability rights movement, echo Babylonian reverence for inherent design, arguing these traits form cultural identities, not defects. The parallel is striking. Babylon's astrologers would have recoiled at correcting a child's star-born traits, just as critics today warn against erasing neurodiversity in pursuit of genetic perfection. Both worldviews challenge a common assumption, that biological difference equals error rather than destiny. The most provocative overlap lies in the concept of unintended consequences. Babylonian texts describe eerie cases where attempts to fix astrologically doomed infants resulted in worse fates, a theme mirrored in modern gene therapy trials. The dynastic chronicle tells of a prince whose clubfoot was surgically altered against celestial advice. He later triggered a civil war, fulfilling his original, cursed destiny through different means. It's a mythic version of today's pleiotropy dilemma, where editing one gene can unexpectedly affect others. The Babylonians called this the knot of heaven, the idea that tampering with one thread of fate could tighten another. Science now calls it off-target effects, but the principle is identical. biology, like astrology, operates in systems too complex for simple interventions. Yet the Babylonian model offered something modern debates often lack: a framework for acceptance. Their astrological medicine didn't seek to cure congenital conditions but to interpret them. A blind seer wasn't seen as broken. His condition marked him as touched by the moon god Sin, granting prophetic sight beyond the physical. This perspective resonates with today's growing recognition that genetic flaws can confer unexpected strengths, like sickle cell traits, malaria resistance, or the creativity linked to bipolar disorder. The Babylonians might ask if our drive to edit humanity's code reflects progress, or a failure to comprehend life's deeper patterns. As we gaze at the same stars that once guided Babylonian astrologers, their clay tablets whisper across time. They understood what we're still grappling with, that biology isn't just science, it's story. Every gene, like every planetary alignment, carries meaning beyond its mechanical function. Whether we see our destinies written in DNA or starlight, the essential dilemma remains unchanged. The power to reshape life comes with a question far older than CRISPR. Are we editors of existence or its humble readers? The Babylonians left their answer in the stars, a reminder that some codes, celestial or genetic, were never meant to be rewritten. Buried beneath the ruins of ancient Babylon lie the Udug-Hul tablets, a collection of exorcism texts so terrifying they were often sealed in jars and buried beneath temple thresholds. These incantations weren't just for casting out ordinary demons, they targeted something far more unsettling: creatures described as abominations of mixed breath, beings assembled from fragments of different animals, even humans, stitched together in defiance of nature's laws. The texts speak of entities with the eyes of a lion, the hands of a man, and the voice of a raven, monstrosities that walked on two legs yet bore the scales of serpents. What's chilling isn't just the imagery, it's the repeated insistence that these horrors weren't born but made. The Udug-Hul rituals reveal a startling detail: these abominations weren't random mutations. They were explicitly linked to acts of forbidden creation, often blamed on sorcerers who played at the looms of the goddess Aruru, the weaver of life. One incantation describes a ritual gone awry, where a priest's attempt to heal a child resulted in a creature with teeth that gnashed without ceasing and skin that burned to the touch. Another tablet warns of the mingling of clay, a metaphorical reference to blending living essences, echoing modern concerns over transgenic experiments. The parallels are impossible to ignore. When Babylonian exorcists chanted spells to banish these entities, they weren't just fighting superstition, they were enforcing a cosmic quarantine against biological tampering. But who or what were these abominations really? Some scholars argue they're purely symbolic, representing diseases or birth defects, yet the text specificity suggests otherwise. A fragment from the Library of Ashurbanipal details an Udug with 7 hearts, each pumping a different venom, a description that feels less like mythology and more like a distorted account of organ grafting. Even more compelling is the Sherpu series, which lists the crime of shaping new life alongside murder and temple robbery. The punishment, eternal haunting by Udug-Hul, implying these beings weren't just mistakes but living evidence of crimes against the gods. The most haunting clue lies in the exorcist's methods. To cleanse a victim of an Udug's influence, priests would sculpt a figurine of the creature, then smash it while reciting. As this image is shattered, so too is the bond that should never have been. The symbolism is profound. The ritual doesn't just destroy the abomination, it undoes the act of creation itself. In an era without microscopes or DNA sequencers, this might have been the closest the Babylonians could come to deleting a genetic error. Modern labs use CRISPR to snip away faulty genes. Babylon's priests used ritual to sever unnatural bonds. Both methods share the same goal: restoring life's original blueprint. What makes the Udug-Hul text so eerily prescient is their underlying philosophy. They don't frame these hybrids as random horrors, but as symptoms of a deeper imbalance, the violation of Kishpu, the natural boundaries between species. Today, we debate the ethics of chimeras like human-mouse hybrids or pig organs grown with human cells. The Babylonians would have recognized these experiments instantly. To them, crossing such lines wasn't just dangerous, it summoned forces beyond human control. Their exorcism rites weren't superstition. They were a grim acknowledgement that once unnatural life is unleashed, it can't simply be disinvented. As we push the boundaries of synthetic biology, the Udug Hull warnings resonate with new urgency. Their clay tablets, cracked but legible, remind us that the fear of playing creator isn't a modern anxiety, it's an ancient one, etched in fire and blood. The abominations they feared may have been myth, but their message is starkly real. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed, and the demons that slip through might not be supernatural, just the unintended consequences of our own ambition. In the shadowy corners of Babylonian magic, few practices provoked as much dread as Temmu, the art of summoning and manipulating the dead. Ancient texts describe rituals where necromancers would chant over skulls, pour libations into graves, and even sew fragments of corpses together in blasphemous attempts to reverse death's decree. But unlike Hollywood's zombies, these weren't mindless ghouls. The Maklu incantation tablets speak of resurrected beings with memories intact, their stolen breaths unnaturally tethered to the living world. What terrified the Babylonians wasn't just the act of reanimation, it was the cosmic imbalance it created. Death, to them, wasn't an end but a sacred transition, a return to the underworld's clay from which all life originally formed. To drag souls back was to steal from the gods themselves. This taboo stretched beyond superstition into practical law. The Code of Hammurabi reserved its harshest punishments for Ashupu sorcerers who roused the sleeping dead. One fragmented tablet from Nippur details the trial of a healer who revived a drowned child, only to be executed for defying the tablet of destinies. The irony is striking. Bringing life could be a capital offense. Their reasoning, resurrected beings disrupted Kispu, the delicate exchange where the living honored ancestors and the dead guided their descendants. A corpse rewoven with magic wasn't a miracle, it was a rogue thread in fate's tapestry. Fast forward to modern labs where scientists freeze extinct species DNA and splice genes to extinct animals like woolly mammoths. The parallels are uncanny. Just as Babylonian necromancers stitched flesh and invoked forbidden chants, geneticists now hybridize ancient DNA with living cells, essentially reanimating genetic ghosts. And like the Ashupu, they face ethical firestorms. When a biotech firm announced plans to resurrect the passenger pigeon, critics evoked the Maklu texts verbatim. You are binding what the earth has rightfully claimed. Whether using spells or CRISPR, the core dilemma remains unchanged. Does reversing extinction honor life or violate its natural cycles? The Babylonians' deepest fear about resurrection wasn't the act itself, but the consequences they believed rippled through reality. The Epic of Gilgamesh lays it bare when Enkidu, briefly revived through magic, describes the underworld as a place where those who touch the sacred clay now wail in hunger. To resurrect him fully, the gods warn, would starve the dead by diverting their essence. This mirrors today's ecological concerns over extinction. Could reviving mammoths drain resources from endangered elephants? The Enuma Elish even describes resurrected beings as holes in the net of existence, threats to the food web. Modern ecologists use eerily similar language, warning that reintroduced species might destabilize ecosystems adapted to their absence. Yet the most profound lesson lies in the Babylonian alternative to necromancy, the Kispum ritual, where families fed and communed with ancestors symbolically, never physically. They understood that honoring life didn't require reversing death, just preserving its memory. As we stand poised to clone long-gone species, their wisdom reverberates, Some boundaries exist not to limit science, but to protect the very balance that lets life endure. The sands of Mesopotamia may have buried their bones, but their warnings echo in every petri dish where extinct DNA stirs anew. At the heart of Babylon's most solemn rituals stood the Marduk ordeal, a ceremony so chilling it blurred the line between justice and divine reckoning. Each year, the towering statue of Marduk, Babylon's patron god, was ritually awakened to pass judgment on those accused of transgressing cosmic laws. But this was no symbolic pageant. Ancient texts describe how the accused would be brought before the statue's hollow eyes, while priests chanted incantations to fill the god's mouth with fire. Then, through mechanisms lost to time, the statue would allegedly react, its hands heating to sear the guilty, or its jeweled gaze lingering unnervingly on specific offenders. Among the crimes said to trigger Marduk's wrath, defiling the works of heaven, a phrase scholars now link to genetic tampering. The ordeal's most infamous case involved a royal physician named Utu, accused of mixing the blood of beasts to mock creation. Cuneiform records from Sippar describe how, after presenting his creations, reportedly goats with elongated necks resembling gazelles, the statue's bronze hands glowed red-hot. The physician's fate, banished to the marshes, his hands severed to prevent further experiments. What makes this account so unsettling isn't just the brutality, but the specificity of the charge. The tablets clarify Utu wasn't punished for failed medicine, but for arrogance before the loom of Aruru, the goddess who wove life's tapestry. His sin wasn't incompetence, it was overreach. Modern reconstructions suggest the ordeal's miracles likely involved hidden pipes channeling boiling water or flammable gases, ancient theater with a deadly serious purpose. But the psychological impact was profound. Unlike typical trials focused on restitution, Marduk's judgments carried existential weight. Offenders weren't just breaking human laws, they'd torn the fabric of me, the divine decrees governing nature. The ritual's climax drove this home. Condemned individuals were forced to drink a potion called Naraku, the bitter cup of remembrance, a hallucinogenic brew that reportedly made them relive their crimes through the god's eyes. One tablet recounts a genetic experimenter's final words: "I see the children of my children, their bones knotted like twisted reeds." This wasn't mere superstition, it was institutionalized bioethics. The ordeal reinforced Babylon's core belief: some knowledge, even if obtainable, shouldn't be wielded. The statues and potions were theatrical, but the underlying principle resonates today. When CRISPR pioneer Giant Cui, he edited human embryos in 2018, triggering global outrage. He wasn't facing a bronze colossus, but the reaction mirrored Marduk's verdict. Both cases reflect societies drawing red lines around life's sanctity, using the tools of their era to enforce them. Perhaps the most revealing detail lies in the ordeal's aftermath. Acquitted individuals received a clay token stamped with Marduk's seal, granting them access to Babylon's famed healing temples, but with one condition. They were barred from the Bit Mummu, the chambers where priests studied life's mysteries. Even the exonerated bore a permanent restraint, a reminder that curiosity must bow to reverence. As we debate gene editing regulations today, the Marduk ordeal whispers a timeless warning. Innovation unchecked by wisdom doesn't elevate civilization, it risks unraveling it. The statue may be dust now, but its question lingers: who guards the guardians of life's code? Among the most disturbing Babylonian texts are the Shama Isbu Omen's clay tablets cataloging unnatural births as cosmic warnings. These weren't just medical records, they were celestial alarm bells. One tablet describes a lamb born with 2 heads and 6 legs, its entrails visible through translucent skin. Another recounts a foal with human hands where hooves should be. To modern eyes, these read like tragic mutations, but to the Babylonians, they were Apodos's signs that someone, somewhere, had tampered with the divine order. The connection was explicit. If a goat bears a kid with scales like a fish, warns a tablet from Nineveh, the king's physicians have sinned against thee by mingling essences. The omens reveal a sophisticated understanding of heredity's fragility. Take CT27, which meticulously links a deformed piglet's extra limbs to the unsealing of forbidden vats, likely a metaphor for accessing restricted knowledge. Another, K2100, describes stillborn twins fused at the spine as the work of those who stir the pot of life without the god's breath. The chilling precision suggests these weren't random superstitions, but observed consequences. Were Babylonians witnessing early bioexperiments gone wrong? Or had they simply intuited, through generations of animal breeding, how easily life's blueprint could fracture? What's striking is how these omens mirror modern teratology. The Shuma Isbu's infant with eyes upon its chest resembles modern cyclopia caused by toxins or genetic errors. Their calves born without mouths align with genetic disorders like agnathia. But unlike today's medical frameworks, the Babylonians saw these anomalies as moral failures, proof that humans had overstepped. A tablet from Uruk explicitly blames a cluster of mutated births on the priest who sought to remake the wild ox in his image. The punishment, not just for the offender but the community, plagues, failed harvests, even the milk of mothers turning bitter. The omen's true power lay in their systematic categorization. Each deformity corresponded to specific transgressions. A sheep with lion-like fur signaled unauthorized crossbreeding, while a bird born flightless implied meddling with celestial patterns. Some warnings even seem to anticipate epigenetic effects. One omen links a stillborn's translucent skin to ancestors who ate the bread of defiled temples, echoing modern insights into generational trauma. This wasn't fear-mongering, it was an intricate framework for maintaining Mesharu, the balance of nature. Most haunting are the remedies. Unlike standard medical texts, these prescribed no cures for the afflicted. Instead, they demanded ritual purification of the perpetrators. The Nambabai rituals involved confessional rites where experimenters publicly renounced their work, then buried their tools in consecrated pits, a symbolic return of stolen knowledge to the earth. It's a stark contrast to today's race for gene editing patents. The Babylonians grasped something we often forget. Once unleashed, biological chaos can't be contained in a lab. Their omens, scratched in clay 4,000 years ago, whisper across time not as primitive fears but as profound ecological wisdom. When we dismiss their warnings as mere myth, we risk repeating the very arrogance they sought to curb. The Babylonians weren't alone in their dread of crossing nature's boundaries. Across the ancient world, cultures wove strikingly similar taboos into their myths and laws, each grappling with the same primal fear, that tampering with life's design invited cosmic chaos. Take Egypt's Book of the Dead, where spell 125 warns against the abomination of reshaping flesh, specifically condemning those who mix the parts of beasts. A papyrus from Thebes even describes a cursed physician who grafted crocodile skin onto humans, resulting in plagues that turned the Nile to pus. Like Babylon's Temmu, the Egyptians saw life as a sacred tapestry. Cut one thread, they believed, and the whole design might unravel. The Hebrew tradition echoes this in Leviticus 19 verse 19, forbidding the mating of different animal species or the sowing of mixed seeds. But the parallel runs deeper than agriculture. The Talmud's Sanhedrin tractate recounts a horror story about the infamous Ben Azai, a scholar who allegedly created a human-animal hybrid by invoking the sacred names. The creature, described with the voice of a man and the hooves of a goat, was swiftly destroyed by rabbis who declared such acts a violation of Tizar B'alei Chaim, the principle forbidding unnecessary suffering to living beings. What's striking is how closely this mirrors Babylonian accounts of the Apkallu, both cultures framing hybridization not just as unnatural but as inherently cruel. Vedic texts take the prohibition even further. The Mahabharata tells of the demon king Vritra, who spliced his own essence with animals to become invincible, only to be struck down by Indra for defiling the wheel of Dharma. Ayurvedic scriptures like the Sushruta Samhita permit healing but draw a hard line at enhancement, warning that altering a person's prakriti, innate nature, disrupts their karma. One passage chillingly predicts that those who rewrite the body's code will birth children with the faces of their sins. Compare this to Babylon's Shama Isbu omens, and a pattern emerges. From the Ganges to the Euphrates, ancient wisdom viewed genetic manipulation as a spiritual pollutant. Even distant cultures shared this intuition. The Zuni of North America spoke of the Itiwana, a cosmic balance disrupted when shamans stitched the skins of wolf and crow. Chinese dynastic records blame the fall of the Shang on emperors who bred horned men as living weapons. What unites these accounts isn't just superstition, it's observation. Ancient healers noticed how inbreeding livestock produced frail offspring, how toxins caused birth defects. Their myths encoded these real-world consequences into moral frameworks, framing biological boundaries as divine law. Yet the contrasts are as revealing as the similarities. Unlike Babylon's detailed legal penalties, Egyptian punishments were often metaphysical. Offenders faced curses in the afterlife rather than earthly trials. Vedic texts uniquely tied genetic taboos to reincarnation, warning that tampering with a body distorted its soul's journey. These nuances show how each culture filtered the same fundamental fear through its own worldview. The Babylonians feared disrupting Temmu's balance. The Hebrews worried about violating creation's holiness, while Hindu seers saw genetics as part of a soul's karmic path. What binds them all is the recognition that life's design isn't arbitrary, it's the foundation of order itself. Whether carved on steels or whispered in rituals, their message transcends time. Some powers belong to the forces that shaped existence, not the creatures living within it. As we edit genes with tools sharper than any ancient scalpel, these scattered voices from the past converge into a single, urgent question: have we outgrown their warnings, or have we simply forgotten how to hear them? 4,000 years after Babylonian priests etched their warnings into clay, scientists in white coats peer into microscopes, wielding tools that would seem like pure magic to the ancients, yet the ethical dilemmas remain eerily unchanged. CRISPR, the revolutionary gene editing technology, allows us to snip and rearrange DNA with precision once attributed only to gods. But as we celebrate curing genetic diseases and engineering malaria-resistant mosquitoes, the old whispers from Mesopotamia grow louder. Those ancient prohibitions against mingling essences and reshaping flesh weren't superstitions, they were harbingers of debates now raging in bioethics committees worldwide. Take the case of the first CRISPR-edited babies in 2018, when Chinese scientist He Jiankui altered embryos to resist HIV. The global scientific community recoiled not just at the ethical breach, but at the haunting familiarity of his actions. His critics used language that could have been lifted straight from the Code of Hammurabi, warning of unraveling the fabric of nature and playing God. The parallels run deeper than rhetoric. Like the Babylonian sorcerers punished for creating hybrid creatures, he faced professional exile and legal consequences. Both eras reached the same conclusion through different frameworks. Some thresholds aren't meant to be crossed. The Babylonians feared genetic mixing would anger the gods. Modern scientists worry about off-target effects and ecological cascades. Yet both concerns stem from reverence for life's interconnectedness. When researchers debate whether gene-drive mosquitoes could destabilize entire ecosystems, they echo the Shama Isbu omens predicting plagues from confused essences. The difference: Babylon saw these risks through a spiritual lens while we quantify them in peer-reviewed studies. But the core intuition remains identical. Life systems are fragile, and tampering breeds unintended consequences. Consider the controversy over farm animals, goats engineered to produce human proteins in their milk. To the Babylonians, this would have been the ultimate Killaloe abomination, a literal mixing of species breaths. Yet even secular bioethicists voice similar discomfort, questioning whether such blurring of boundaries could erode our fundamental respect for life's integrity. The era epic described hybrid creatures bringing chaos. Today, committees debate whether transgenic organisms might trigger allergic reactions or horizontal gene transfer. Different vocabularies, same primal caution. Perhaps most strikingly, both eras grapple with the specter of inequality. The Marduk ordeal punished elites who reshaped beasts for pleasure, fearing such power would corrupt society's fabric. Today, as gene therapies carry million-dollar price tags, we confront the same fear. Will CRISPR become a tool for genetic haves and have-nots? The Babylonian solution, ritual restrictions on who could access certain knowledge, finds its modern counterpart in calls for CRISPR moratoriums and equitable distribution frameworks. Yet there's one crucial difference. The ancients saw genetic boundaries as divine commands. We view them as evolutionary accidents. This shift empowers us to cure sickle cell anemia, but also risks blinding us to wisdom harder to quantify. The Babylonians encoded a truth we're still relearning, that progress untempered by humility courts disaster. As we stand where myth and science converge, their 4,000-year-old warnings resonate not as primitive fears but as time-tested wisdom. The clay tablets may have crumbled, but their message endures. The power to rewrite life demands more than technical skill. It requires the wisdom to know when not to. The most profound lesson the Babylonians left us isn't written in laws or myths. It's etched into the very way they saw existence. At the core of their warnings about genetic manipulation lies a principle modern science often overlooks: humility. Not the meek, passive kind, but an active reverence for the systems that sustain life. Their texts frame creation as a finely tuned instrument. Pluck one string too hard, and the entire symphony falls into discord. Today, as we splice genes and engineer species, their insistence on restraint feels less like primitive fear and more like hard-earned wisdom. The Enuma Elish doesn't just describe a universe built by gods. It depicts a cosmos where every element, from the stars to the smallest seed, has a designated role. To disrupt that balance wasn't just foolish, it was sacrilege. This humility extended beyond theology into practical governance. Consider the Kudaru stones, boundary markers inscribed with curses against those who altered the land's natural state. One such stone, now in the Louvre, warns that draining a marsh or grafting foreign crops would summon the Udug hull to drink the offender's breath. Dramatic. Absolutely, but beneath the poetic threats lies a razor-sharp insight. Ecosystems operate on delicate interdependencies. The Babylonians didn't need modern ecology to recognize that tampering with one species could ripple through an entire food web. Their reverence for boundaries wasn't superstition, it was systems thinking encoded in myth. Yet their greatest ethical contribution lies in how they framed innovation's double-edged sword. The Apkallu sages embody this tension: hybrid beings who brought civilizations gifts yet were ultimately banished for overreach. Their legends acknowledge progress's allure while warning that not all knowledge should be wielded. A fragment from the era epic puts it starkly: the tool that carves the statue may also deface the temple. In our age of synthetic biology, this metaphor resonates painfully. CRISPR can edit away genetic diseases, but the same technology could, and has been used to create weaponized pathogens. The Babylonians would nod grimly. They too understood that power untempered by wisdom courts catastrophe. What sets their ethical framework apart is its emphasis on collective consequences. Modern debates often focus on individual rights. Shouldn't parents edit genes to prevent their child's suffering? The Shama Isbu omens answer with a communal lens. Unnatural births weren't private tragedies, but omens foretelling plagues and famines for entire cities. Their perspective forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. When we edit human embryos, who bears the risk if those edits cascade through future generations? When we release gene-drive mosquitoes, what obligations do we owe to ecosystems we can't fully predict? The Babylonians measured actions by their impact on the seventh generation, a timescale our quarterly profit-driven world struggles to grasp. Perhaps the most striking parallel lies in their concept of irreversible harm. The Tablets of Destiny myth warns that once cosmic laws are broken, some changes can't be undone. Modern genetics confirms this in chilling ways. Gene drives designed to spread edits through wild populations are literally called mutagenic chain reactions, a biological point of no return. The Babylonian term for such thresholds was pagra shalatari, the wound that cannot heal. Their solution, institutionalized caution. Kings consulted panels of priests, astrologers, and physicians before altering land or breeding practices. Contrast this with today's biotech startups, where a single lab's experiment could alter global ecosystems before regulators blink. At its heart, the Babylonian ethical model revolves around a question we've yet to answer: who guards the guardians of life's code? Their answer was spiritual. The gods enforced boundaries through omens and ordeals. Ours must be structural, international treaties, transparent research, and perhaps most crucially, a cultural shift. Not toward fear of progress, but toward their nuanced blend of curiosity and reverence. As we decode life's building blocks with tools that would dazzle even Marduk, their clay tablets whisper a timeless truth. The greatest scientific revolutions aren't those that expand our power, but those that deepen our wisdom in wielding it. Scholars have pored over Babylonian texts for generations, but one question splits academic opinion down the middle. Were these genetic taboos concrete laws or cosmic cautionary tales? On one side stand the literalists like Oxford Assyriologist Dr. Selina Black, who argues the language is too precise to be metaphorical. She points to the diagnostic handbook's gruesome detail instructions for identifying beasts with the limbs of two creatures that match modern descriptions of chimeras. These weren't vague omens, Black insists. They read like forensic reports. Her team uncovered a fragment in the British Museum's vaults listing exact ratios of animal-to-human hybrid features, complete with measurements evidence, she claims, of real-world experiments the Babylonians sought to curb. Yet symbolic interpreters push back fiercely. Professor Elias Marduk from the University of Chicago frames the texts as theological allegories. When incantations warn of lions with scorpion tails, they're not describing gene splicing, he argues. They're dramatizing the chaos of moral decay. His research highlights how Babylonian art depicts hybrid creatures alongside floods and falling stars, classic symbols of divine displeasure. To him, the bans were less about biology and more about reinforcing social order. A noble caught crossbreeding animals wasn't punished for the act itself, but for arrogantly mimicking the gods' creative power. The real crime, hubris. Then there are the fringe theories that electrify conspiracy circles. Independent researcher Leela Cannon's controversial translation of the Nabu prophecies describes metal wands that rearrange life's threads, a phrase she claims references ancient biotechnology. Her fieldwork near Babylon's ruins allegedly uncovered clay vessels with traces of unknown alloys, fueling speculation about lost sciences. Mainstream academics dismiss this as fantasy, but even skeptics pause at anomalies like the Nineveh medical texts. One passage details a procedure using the blood of the unblemished bull mixed with powdered lapis, which geneticist Dr. Ryan Patel notes bears uncanny similarity to early CRISPR protocols using guide RNA and carrier viruses. Coincidence, probably, he admits, but it's unsettling how often their magic mirrors our science. The debate takes a sharper turn when examining penalties. Literalists highlight laws prescribing execution for hybridizing species, punishments far harsher than those for murder or theft. You don't drown a man for metaphor, argues Black. Yet symbolic scholars counter that these draconian measures targeted cultic practices, not labs. The Maklu tablets describe sorcerers creating hybrids as part of necromantic rites, blending dark magic with forbidden anatomy. Professor Marduk sees this as proof the bans were religious, not biological. They feared the ritual pollution of mingling essences, not the genetic consequences. Underlying all interpretations is a shared recognition the Babylonians, whether describing real horrors or symbolic ones, grasped a profound truth about life's fragility. Their vivid warnings, literal or not, resonate because they articulate fears we've only recently begun to quantify: unintended mutations, ecological domino effects, the ethical weight of playing creator. As geneticist Dr. Priya Desai observes, it doesn't matter if they foresaw CRISPR or not. What's chilling is how accurately their myths map onto dilemmas we now face in peer-reviewed journals. The divide between literal and symbolic may never fully close, but perhaps that's the point. Their texts endure not as answers, but as mirrors reflecting back the timeless tension between human ingenuity and the boundaries we dare not cross. Digging through the layers of Mesopotamian soil, archaeologists have unearthed objects that defy easy explanation: figurines with grotesque hybrid features, cylinder seals depicting beings that blend animal and human traits in ways that unsettle even seasoned researchers. Among the most perplexing is the so-called Lion Man of Ur, a clay statuette dating back to 2100 BCE. Its torso distinctly human, but its head a snarling lion's muzzle, complete with intricate carvings suggesting fur texture. Unlike mythological creatures like Lamashu, which followed symbolic conventions, this figure's anatomy is rendered with startling biological accuracy, the spinal column subtly curved to support a bipedal stance, the clawed fingers gripping what might be surgical tools. The artifact was found in a scribe's workshop near the ruins of a healing temple, nestled among medical tablets describing organ transplants. Coincidence or evidence of something more unsettling? Then there's the Nimrod vase, a vessel decorated with bas-reliefs of creatures that seem ripped from a geneticist's nightmare. Goats with scorpion tails, birds sporting human hands, even a fish with the face of an infant. At first glance, these might be dismissed as artistic whimsy, except for the cuneiform inscription circling the rim. Beware the works of those who stitch flesh without the breath of Enki. The phrase stitch flesh is telling. In Babylonian medical texts, this referred to grafting skin or repairing wounds, but in Omen literature, it denoted the unnatural fusion of living beings. The vase was discovered in the palace of Ashurnasirpal II, a king known for his fascination with exotic animals. Royal records note he employed keepers of strange beasts, and one fragmented scroll mentions a menagerie containing creatures not born of the womb. Perhaps the most chilling finds come from the library of Ashurbanipal's hidden chambers. Among charred tablets salvaged from the fire that consumed Nineveh, scholars found sketches labeled Domu Shalakishoti, a blood of no kind. These drawings depict winged humans with elongated skulls, their limbs labeled with measurements and notations like Moon Cycle 7, breath unstable. Nearby tablets contain lists of animal parts: lion hearts, eagle eyes, serpent venom paired with lunar phases. The arrangement suggests recipes not for potions but for constructs. One badly damaged text describes a ritual where the clay of the newborn is mingled with the dust of the old, possibly referring to blending genetic material across generations. Modern geneticists would recognize the danger. Such mixing could trigger catastrophic epigenetic mismatches, but the real smoking gun might lie in the overlooked demon bowls of Babylon. These inverted clay vessels, inscribed with binding spells, were traditionally used to trap malevolent spirits. However, specimens from the Kassite period bear bizarre additions. Strands of hair, teeth, even preserved tissue sealed beneath the inscriptions. Recent DNA analysis revealed shocking anomalies. Some samples contain genetic markers from multiple species spliced together at the molecular level. One bowl held fibers with human, canine, and avian DNA so thoroughly interlaced it defies natural decomposition patterns. The accompanying text warns of those who would sow two souls in one vessel, blaming plagues on such experiments. Could these be physical evidence of attempted hybridization? Skeptics argue contamination, but the patterns suggest deliberate manipulation, not accidental mixing. What makes these artifacts so compelling is their context. They aren't isolated oddities but correlate with legal texts punishing makers of mixed forms. A recently deciphered court record from Sippar details the trial of a healer named Bel Ahuidina, accused of grafting the skin of a dog onto a slave. Witnesses describe the patient referred to as the thing that should not be, succumbing to fever as its limbs twitched without rhythm, the punishment. The healer was forced to ingest his own potions, a grim poetic justice. Meanwhile, in Mari, archaeologists uncovered a sealed tomb containing skeletons with skeletal anomalies, extra ribs, fused vertebrae arranged around a central figurine of a fish-human hybrid. The site's epitaph reads simply, "Here lie the children of defiance." These discoveries blur the line between myth and history. While mainstream academia dismisses literal interpretations, the sheer volume of evidence suggests the Babylonians weren't just fantasizing about genetic horrors. They may have been documenting real attempts to cross boundaries that even modern science approaches with trepidation. The artifacts whisper a unified warning: some doors once opened cannot be closed. As we decode their secrets, we're left to wonder, were these objects the products of forbidden knowledge, or were they meant to guard against it? The answer, like the hybrid creatures they depict, may lie somewhere in between. Hollywood's obsession with genetic horror has roots stretching all the way back to Babylon. From Blade Runner's bioengineered replicants to the island of Dr. Moreau's grotesque hybrids, modern sci-fi channels the same primal dread Babylonian priests once etched into clay. Take Jurassic Park's iconic warning: your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should, which mirrors the epic of Era's lament over humans, seizing the clay of life without the god's wisdom. The tropes are identical: ambition outstrips restraint, unnatural creations rebel, and chaos erupts. Even the visual language overlaps. Compare the fish-skinned Apkallu carvings to Hellboy's Abe Sapien, or the Sherpu text's Chimera descriptions to Resident Evil's mutated horrors. Video games amplify these fears interactively. BioShock's plasmid system, where players splice sea slug DNA into their veins, feels lifted straight from Babylonian warnings against mixing essences. The grotesque splicers, once human monsters twisted by genetic tampering, embody the Udug-Hull omens, abominations of mingled breath. Even indie hits like Carrion, where you control a lab-escaped hybrid, echo the Shuma Isbu's terror of self-replicating biological horrors. What's revealing is how these narratives borrow not just imagery but moral frameworks. Like Babylonian law punishing corrupters of flesh, games often impose consequences. Deus Ex locks certain augmentations behind moral choices, while Cyberpunk 2077 depicts genetic edits triggering psychosis. The message is identical to Hammurabi's code: cross certain lines and you risk losing your humanity. Yet pop culture also subverts these ancient taboos. X-Men frames mutation as evolution, not sacrilege, flipping the Enuma Elish's rigid hierarchy on its head. Gatoka's genetically imperfect hero triumphs over engineered elites, challenging Babylonian notions of celestial ordained destinies. Even Splice's controversial human-animal hybrid evokes sympathy, complicating the Killaloo prohibitions. These stories suggest a tension the Babylonians never resolved. When does playing God become empowerment? The Apkallu sages, themselves hybrids, embody this duality, both revered and feared. modern media mirrors that ambiguity with Mass Effect's genophage cure arc asking whether genetic intervention can ever be redemptive. The most striking parallel lies in how both eras use horror to process real-world anxieties. Babylonian Shuma Isbu omens likely reflected fears of actual birth defects from inbreeding or toxins, just as Annihilation's shimmering mutants articulate modern worries over CRISPR gone wrong. Black Mirror's Metalhead reimagines the Udug hull as killer drones, proving the archetype adapts to each generation's existential threats. Even children's media isn't immune over the Garden Wall's beast, a twisted amalgam of flora and fauna, channels the same unease as those clay demon bowls holding hybrid DNA. What binds these stories across millennia isn't just shared imagery but shared purpose. The Babylonians used myth to police biotechnological boundaries. We use sci-fi to test them. Both serve as cultural immune systems, rehearsing disasters before they happen. When The Boys depicts corporations weaponizing transgenic supersoldiers, it's not so different from Marduk ordeal parables warning kings against reshaping warriors. The medium changes, but the warning remains: creation without reverence courts catastrophe. As genetic engineering leaps from screens to labs, these stories become more than entertainment. They're the modern tablets of destiny, urging us to wield godlike power with mortal wisdom. Long before Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, two ancient cultures wrestled with the same chilling question: what happens when humans try to play creator? The Jewish legend of the golem, a clay servant animated by sacred words, finds its eerie precursor in Babylonian tales of artificial beings like the Elu, a soulless construct molded from earth and blood. Both stories pulse with identical fears, revealing how deeply these civilizations understood the perils of blurring the line between life and artifice. The golem's most famous iteration emerges from 16th century Prague, where Rabbi Judah Loew supposedly carved a giant from river clay and brought it to life by inscribing Emet truth on its forehead. This creature, bound to protect the Jewish quarter from pogroms, was no mindless robot. It was a being of terrifying duality, obedient yet unpredictable, its strength matched only by its capacity for unintended violence. The parallels to Babylonian Elu are uncanny. Texts from Ashurbanipal's library describe these entities as bodies without breath, shaped by priests to guard temples but prone to turning on their makers. One fragmented incantation warns that an Elu deprived of offerings might tear the flesh of those who needed it, mirroring the golem's rampages when its controlling word was erased. What unites these myths isn't just their shared Mesopotamian roots, it's their nuanced grasp of creation's moral weight. The Sefer Yetzirah, foundational to golem lore, frames life-giving as a divine prerogative. Humans may replicate the mechanics, but true animation requires stolen sacred fire. Similarly, Babylonian Enuma Elish reserves the breath of life for Marduk alone. Both traditions depict artificial life as inherently unstable because it lacks the soul's divine spark. A Talmudic account describes a golem circling its creator endlessly like a broken machine, while a Nineveh tablet speaks of Elu collapsing into dust when the gods withdraw their tacit approval. These aren't tales of triumph, they're cautionary fables about the limits of human ingenuity, yet the differences are as revealing as the similarities. The golem legend carries a redemptive undercurrent. Loew's creature ultimately saves its people, embodying the potential for controlled creation when guided by wisdom. Babylonian myths lack this optimism. Their artificial beings, from the Elu to the Utuku, are almost universally destructive, reflecting a culture that saw unchecked experimentation as an affront to cosmic order. Where Jewish mysticism allows for holy purpose in human-made life, Babylonian cosmology frames it as a violation of Temmu, the natural law. Modern genetics resurrects these ancient tensions with unsettling precision. CRISPR babies and synthetic organisms force us to ask the same questions that haunted Babylonian priests and Kabbalists. Can artificial life ever be truly controlled? Does creation without reverence inevitably breed chaos? The Golem and Alu myths suggest an answer, not in their monsters but in their makers. Both traditions punish not the creation but the creator's hubris. As we stand on the brink of designing life from scratch, these stories whisper across millennia not to paralyze progress, but to remind us that some powers demand more than technical skill. They require the humility to recognize where wisdom ends and folly begins. The warnings etched into Babylonian clay 4,000 years ago were never meant to stay buried in the past. As we push the boundaries of synthetic biology, artificial life, and human enhancement, their ancient prohibitions against mingling essences take on startling new relevance. We stand at a crossroads eerily similar to the one faced by Babylonian priests armed with godlike tools to reshape life itself, yet unsure whether our wisdom matches our technical prowess. Their solution wasn't to halt progress, but to embed reverence into innovation. What would it look like if we applied that same principle to today's biotech revolution? Consider CRISPR, our modern counterpart to the mythical loom of Aruru. Like the Babylonian weaver goddess who shaped life's tapestry, this technology allows us to snip and stitch DNA with precision. Yet the Enuma Elish's warning about unraveling the threads of destiny resonates when we see unintended consequences like gene drives spreading beyond lab boundaries or off-target mutations echoing through generations. The Babylonians feared disrupting Temmu, the cosmic balance. Today's ecologists warn of butterfly effects in genetic ecosystems. Their answer was institutionalized restraint, multi-layered reviews by priests, healers, and astrologers before altering any living system. We might replace zodiac charts with ethics committees, but the core insight remains. Some thresholds demand more than a single lab's oversight. Artificial intelligence compounds these risks exponentially. When researchers train neural networks to design synthetic organisms or propose using AI to optimize human DNA, we're venturing beyond even the Apkallu sage's most audacious experiments. The Udug Hull tablets described horrors born when breath was given to soulless clay, a chilling parallel to creating self-replicating nanobots or chatbots programmed to manipulate biology. Babylon's solution wasn't to ban innovation but to compartmentalize it, restricting certain knowledge to temple sanctums under strict covenants. Translated to modern terms, should AI-driven biotech require sacred firewalls, air-gapped systems perhaps, or mandatory delay mechanisms to prevent runaway replication? Transhumanism presents the ultimate test of Babylonian wisdom. The movement's goal, merging humans with machines to overcome mortality, mirrors Adapa's pursuit of godhood, but with silicon instead of magic. Neural implants, CRISPR-enhanced cognition, and cybernetic limbs offer incredible potential. Yet the Marduk ordeal reminds us that power untethered from humility courts disaster. Their hybrid Apkallu were both revered and feared, ultimately banished for overreach. Modern transhumanists might argue that evolution itself is playing God, but the Babylonians would counter with a distinction. Natural selection works through incremental consensus over millennia, not individual whim. Their laws punished not progress but recklessness, like editing human embryos without understanding multigenerational impacts. The most urgent lesson lies in their concept of kishpu, forbidden knowledge that corrupts by its very nature. Today's biotech giants patent gene sequences while startups sell DIY bacterial engineering kits online. The Babylonians would shudder at this commodification, having seen how unconstrained access to transformative tools breeds exploitation. Their Kudru stones impose geographic limits on certain practices. Perhaps we need planetary treaties restricting gene drives or AI-designed pathogens. When the Epic of Era described hybrid monsters breeding plagues, it wasn't opposing science. It was anticipating dual-use dilemmas we now face daily. Yet Babylonian wisdom wasn't about blind prohibition. Their healing temples advanced medicine while honoring natural boundaries, much like modern bioethics balances innovation with precaution. The key difference: they framed these limits not as bureaucratic hurdles but as sacred covenants. In our secular age, we might call it stewardship, the recognition that DNA isn't just code to be hacked, but an ancient manuscript we've barely learned to read. As we engineer glowing plants and chimeric organs, their clay tablets whisper a simple truth. The right to reshape life begins with the duty to understand its fragile brilliance. 4 millennia later, the burden of proof still rests on those who would cross the next frontier, not to ask if we can, but whether we've earned the right to. So where does this leave us, standing at the crossroads of ancient wisdom and modern science? The Babylonians carved their fears into clay, but we're the ones holding the crisper scalpel. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Should those 4,000-year-old warnings still give us pause, or have we outgrown them? Imagine you're in the room when a scientist proposes the next big leap in genetic engineering. Maybe it's editing human embryos to eliminate disease, or blending animal DNA to create disease-resistant livestock. Where would you draw the line? Is it when we start enhancing intelligence, or when we tinker with traits that could ripple through future generations? The Babylonians believed some doors shouldn't be opened, but we live in a world where those doors are already off their hinges. Think about the stories that stuck with you most in this journey. Was it the Udug hull abominations, those horrifying hybrids stitched together from fragments of life? Or maybe Adapa's choice, turning down immortality because the gods feared what he might become? These aren't just dusty myths, they're mirrors reflecting our own dilemmas. When you hear about labs growing human cells in pig embryos or startups offering CRISPR kits for home use, does it spark excitement or unease? The Babylonians had a word for that feeling, pulutu, the sacred dread that comes with touching forces bigger than ourselves. Here's where it gets personal. Let's say genetic editing could erase a disease that runs in your family. Would you hesitate if the treatment also altered your descendants in ways we can't yet predict? The Shama Isbu omens treated birth defects as divine messages, but today we call them genetic mutations. Does that shift in language make the ethical stakes any clearer? And what about the bigger picture? Should corporations patent engineered life forms, or does that echo the Babylonian fear of hoarding creation's power? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you encountered a modern genetic boundary that gave you pause? Maybe it's the idea of bringing back extinct species, or the viral videos of biohackers self-administering experimental gene therapies. The Babylonians didn't have comment sections, but they left their answers in clay and stone. Now it's our turn to write the next chapter. After all, the future of genetic science won't be decided just in labs, it'll be shaped by conversations like this one. So tell me, which ancient warning feels most urgent to you, and what line would you never cross? The Babylonian worldview wasn't just a set of superstitions, it was a profound recognition of life's delicate equilibrium. Their texts spanning medicine, law, and myth all converge on one unshakable principle: existence is a sacred tapestry woven by forces beyond human understanding, and to pull at its threads recklessly is to invite unraveling. This wasn't fear of progress, but reverence for the intricate systems that sustain life. When they forbade mixing animal essences or reshaping human forms, they weren't simply resisting change. They were codifying centuries of observation that ecosystems, heredity, and even cosmic order thrive on stability. Their dread of genetic manipulation wasn't about lacking imagination. It was born from recognizing how easily balance tips into chaos when nature's boundaries are breached. Consider how their cosmology mirrors modern science in unexpected ways. The Enuma Elish describes creation as a meticulous organization of primordial chaos, not unlike how DNA erects molecules into life. Their Temmu laws functioned like biological firewalls, preventing the kind of unchecked hybridization that today's ecologists warn could trigger irreversible cascades. Even their hybrid Apkallu sages embodied this tension, beings of wisdom who nonetheless carried a warning in their very flesh. The Babylonians understood something we're still grappling with, that power over life's building blocks carries responsibility for the entire web those blocks support. A single edited gene, like a misplaced stitch in their sacred loom metaphor, could distort the whole pattern, yet here we stand at humanity's most audacious threshold. CRISPR, synthetic biology, and artificial intelligence have handed us tools the Babylonians would have considered divine prerogatives. We can erase hereditary diseases, resurrect extinct species, even redesign the human body, all with techniques precise enough to make their Sherpu incantations seem quaint. But precision isn't the same as wisdom. Their tablets of destiny myth holds a chilling lesson. Once cosmic laws are broken, some changes can't be undone. Gene drives already engineered into mosquitoes don't stop at national borders. Edited embryos pass alterations to future generations. Synthetic organisms once released can't be recalled like faulty products. The Babylonians feared these thresholds because they grasped what we often forget, that science moves faster than comprehension, and consequences outlast good intentions. What makes their warnings so urgent today isn't their ancient origins, but their eerie prescience. They anticipated modern dilemmas with startling clarity. The slippery slope from healing to enhancement, the commodification of life's code, even the existential risks of creating intelligence beyond human control. Their solution, embedding restraint into cultural DNA through myth and law, might seem archaic until you consider our own struggles to regulate biotech. When corporations patent genetically modified humans or rogue scientists edit embryos in secret, we're replaying Babylon's fears without their safeguards. Their greatest insight was that innovation untempered by humility isn't progress, it's a danger to the very fabric of existence. So as we hover over the keyboard of life's code, cursor blinking on the save button for edits that will echo through millennia, their clay tablets whisper a final question. Some doors once opened cannot be closed. What will we unleash, and more importantly, are we prepared to live with what steps through? The Babylonians spent 4,000 years etching their answer in stone. Our reply is still being written, one double helix at a time.